Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Marianne Garcia Bowerman. I am the president-elect for ERAS Executive Committee. Today, we also have Kylene Smartis, who's the current president for ERAS, Dana Cooley, who's also one of our executive committee members, and she will be doing the introduction for our guest speaker today. Enjoy.
Thank you, Marianne. My name is Dana Cooley. I'm the secretary for ERAS, and I'd like to introduce Dr. McLean. She is the Chief Wellness Officer for the Henry Ford Medical Group in Detroit, Michigan, where she develops programming to assist clinicians in optimizing healthy coping strategies, finding good life balance, and delivering high-quality healthcare. Prior to her appointment at Henry Ford Health in 2017, Dr. McLean served as Associate Dean of Student Affairs and Career Development at Wayne State University School of Medicine. Dr. McLean has a long relationship with the Henry Ford Health System. Previously, she worked at Henry Ford Hospital, where she served as Psychiatry Residency Program Director, Chair of the Graduate Medical Education Committee, and Director of Education for the Psychiatry Department. She also mentioned this morning that she is currently restarting as the program director for psychiatry. We'll see how long she does it this time. So let's welcome Dr. McLean to discuss finding fulfillment in spite of it all.
Thank you, Dana, and everyone on the call. It's so great to be here with you today. I was joking with your leadership this morning about how I feel like I'm a program director in recovery. And that, one of the things that I've learned, because I first became a program director in 2003, and then became a program director again in 2023. And I feel like it does get easier. Your perspective on things certainly change. And if I've learned anything, I've learned that residents are just residents, and that they're always going to find things to complain about. And I think that what I realized, what I didn't know in 2003, which I realize now, is that it's not personal. And I think that that's really freed me up. I'm really excited, though, to talk to you about a topic that I'm really passionate about. I understand that it might be difficult during this next hour to listen to some of the things that I'm going to tell you about how you can find fulfillment. And partially it's because your internal soundtrack is so full. And I don't know about you, but I had a rough week. This is a really busy week with no white space and running from thing to thing. And I understand your role as a coordinator, having been in graduate medical education for so long. So I know that you are holding a lot, and that we're actually on the verge of ERAS opening up. And I'm feeling the pressure, and I'm sure you are too. So I hope that you can spend just this hour with me today focused on you and what you can do to find more fulfillment in your daily lives. I hope you'll take the science I'm presenting today and the strategies to free up some of your overload. Today's talk, Finding Fulfillment in Spite of It All, is based a lot on my own experiences, and that also of a woman named Carolyn Webb, who wrote a terrific book entitled How to Have a Happy Day. So if you're passionate about this topic after we talk and you want to learn more, look up that book on how to have a happy day. I'm sure that we all want to have good days. So I hope to share with you some ideas that I have about how you can have more good days and less bad days. So in the context of just getting into this space of listening and thinking and pausing, I want you to spend a moment just imagining your worst day at work. And I want you to think about, if you feel like it, it's not required, but if you feel like it, feel free to put in the chat box what your worst day at work would look like. How would you feel? What would be going on around you? How would that impact the rest of your day, even when you went home? How would that worst day look for you? I know when I'm having a bad day, it looks really chaotic inside my brain. And sometimes I have to pause and tell myself, the other day I had to tell myself to chill. I was I was hearing my husband in my head that, okay, Lisa, you got to calm down, you got to chill, right? Okay. So not to depress you too much, you've all been thinking a little bit. Everyone needing something, thinking that you wish you had more time, saw some things. Absolutely. Don't we all wish we had more time? And, some of these strategies that we're going to be talking about are things that we can also do at home. It's not just, I think, in the context of work. But I think none of us ever have enough time to do all the things that we want to do. So thank you for those who chimed in. Now I want you to shift gears and I want you to imagine your best day at work. How would that look? I think for me, it's almost easier to imagine my best day than it is to imagine my worst. Maybe because I tend to be kind of a positive person. So again, feel free to use that chat box. I'd love to hear from you. If you were imagining your best day at work, how would that look? You'd be feeling appreciated. Absolutely. And I do think a coordinator role can sometimes be a thankless job. I know that I really feel like my coordinator is the glue that keeps our program going. And I feel like you can't actually have a good residency program unless you have a good, strong coordinator to help you. Yeah, isn't it amazing when your best day is like, I got everything done that I wanted to get done that day? And, I feel like as a coordinator, it's probably sometimes really hard to pace yourself because there's so many competing things that you have to do. So I'm really glad, though, to hear that people are making lists for each day. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So let's take a look about what we're going to talk about. We're going to review some of the science, and then we're going to dig deeply. I'm going to talk to you about 4 strategies for life improvement. We're going to talk about setting an intentional direction for your day, actually how to make the hours in your day go a little bit further, how to get through some of the setbacks and annoyances of your everyday, and then how do you boost your energy and enthusiasm and make you, feel more joyful, both in your personal and in your professional life. I believe anything, no matter how wild or ridiculous, if there's evidence for it, the wilder and more ridiculous something is, however, the firmer and more solid the evidence will have to be. And so this is really beginning to kind of lean into what is the evidence around how our brains are wired and how that impacts how we approach each day. So let's talk about the science behind how our brains work. And we're going to talk about 2 areas of the brain. Don't worry, this won't be too deep. It'll be more at a superficial level, but I think it'll hopefully kind of help you think about how is my brain actually wired. We're going to talk about the 2 system brain and the mind-body loop. So the brain's activity is actually split into 2 complementary and parallel systems. And one is our deliberate brain, which sits in our front of our brain here in the prefrontal cortex and is controlled and reflective. And then the other is our automatic brain, which is our instinctual, reactive, and typically unconscious part of the brain. And it's really the combination of the 2 that makes us smart and productive. But we can make our cognitive resources go even further if we adjust the way we work to reflect each system's strengths and weaknesses. The deliberate brain really excels in handling anything unfamiliar, complex, or abstract. Because the deliberate brain really relies on our working memory, it's important to know that you can only hold about 3 to 4 pieces of information at any time. And that if you become overexerted, it can actually reduce the number of pieces of them. And you probably all remember that. It's like, oh my gosh, the more overwhelmed you get, the more you feel like you can't think. And this probably wouldn't be a big deal if we led simple lives, but we don't. And especially in the context of your role, you're trying to hold 25 things all at once. And it's really impossible to do that. And even in sometimes a brief conversation, your brain has to not only process the meaning of the words, but the person's body language and their tone of voice and countless other things. So your brain has to rapidly calculate the right thing to do. And when our deliberate brain is overused or overloaded or distracted, it's harder for you to be wise and balanced or reliable. And so the deliberate brain is what helps us to be like at our best. Your automatic system lightens the load on your deliberate brain by automating most of what you do and taking fast shortcuts that kind of filter out the irrelevant information and options. Um, and that's mostly helpful, but sometimes, unfortunately, can leave you with blind spots. Because the fact is nobody ever experiences an entirely objective version of reality. And this can lead to wires getting crossed and sometimes poor choices. And it can kind of get us into trouble, especially when we react without thinking in a sort of automatic, reflexive way. So that's one part of our brain. And then there's the mind-body loop. So you probably already know this. There's a link between our mental and our physical state. And I don't know about you, but I know that when I don't sleep well, that makes it harder for me to be patient and witty and funny because I feel tired and exhausted. So the state of our bodies and that of our minds are really deeply entwined, I think, more than we generally realize. And as a result, simple like physical interventions can actually immediately boost our intellectual performance and our emotional resilience and even our confidence. So the way we treat our body actually has a huge effect on the way our body performs. And as a result, studies show we can reap immediate benefit and emotional dividends from investing in things like exercising and sleep and even taking a moment to take a deep breath or even to smile broadly or to stand a little bit taller or to grab a snack. So it's interesting that research shows that mimicking the physical actions actually associated with feeling happy and confident and relaxed actually fools our brain into thinking that we are happy. So it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever tried this as a technique, but it can pay to put a smile on your face. And so you see here, my last point is fake it till you make it. Which is something that my mom always taught me. But actually, there's some science behind putting that smile on because you're fooling your brain into thinking that things are actually a little bit better than what you thought. So now understanding a little about how our brains work allows us to set kind of key strategies to help us be more fulfilled, both at our work and in our home. In our home life. So let's talk about the first of our strategies. And it's really focused on priorities, and it helps us to set an intentional direction for your day. The truth is we see the world based on the glasses that we wear. And we often don't pay attention to other people's stories. We only see our own perspective. But if we can approach things thinking about what we want to accomplish, it can help us to actually even be more deliberate about what we can actually do that day. So imagining in your mind can actually shape our reality. It was interesting because Dana and I were talking about before you got on the call, feeling a little bit nervous about giving the talk today. And I was talking about, I can imagine myself like kicking it out of the ballpark or hitting it out of the ballpark and doing an amazing job at my presentation today that thinking about it and imagining it can actually be more successful in the actual execution. And so it does give our minds that really are very powerful. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. I love this saying by Carl Jung. And I think it reminds us of the importance of self-awareness. So if we begin to kind of set intentional direction for our day, then we can be more effective. But one of the first things that you have to do, I think, when we're setting intention is to understand that we have to choose our filter. We often cruise through our busy days on autopilot, rolling from task to task without pausing to kind of stop and think. The fact is, we consciously only notice a small selection of what's actually happening around us, and we filter out the rest. But the thing is that our filters strongly influence our priorities and our assumptions that we take in. And so this really gives us a huge opportunity. It means with a few minutes of kind of mental preparation and maybe a quick check and reset on our priorities and assumptions, we can actually shift the way we experience the day, making it more productive and enjoyable. And we can do that, through two different ways. One is, our assumptions. And that is, checking and challenging the assumptions you carry with you every day. What negative expectations do you have going into, like even today's talk? If you thought you brought with you a negative expectation, then that's going to impact how you experience it. But however, if you brought in that it was going to be positive, then that's going to impact too. So sometimes our assumptions cause us to only see part of the situation. And then most of us, many of us, just how our brains work, we use confirmation bias to tell ourselves that we're always right. So a sign you might be doing this is when you catch yourself using absolute language, like never or always, and you find yourself using these strong words. It can really be a helpful cue that you might not be actually taking in all of the information and you're actually making assumptions. The second is attention. So given your assumptions, the other A is attention. And this is asking yourself, where do you want to direct most of your attention? And what attitudes do you bring with you into the day? And what do you want to make sure that you notice? Figuring out what you want to see more of, and then making sure you look at it. So the point behind all of this is that we don't want to miss like a clear opportunity. We really want to understand and be deliberate about what our assumptions are and think about really what we want to pay attention to each and every day, because this really allows us to reset when we understand or when we're going in a direction that we actually don't want to go. Okay, so now that you've been really thinking about your filter and the assumptions that you make and the attentions, where you put that attention, I want you to kind of think about how you can set specific goals. Maybe not even just goals, but setting great goals. So think about personally what behaviors of yours will support you in the intention that you set for yourself each and every day. And so one of the things that I do, and you guys were putting this in the chat, was about making lists. And I'm definitely a list maker, and I actually call it a brain-friendly to-do list. So a brain-friendly to-do list is actually, knowing that you can only hold like 3 or 4 things in your working memory at a time. You want to make sure that you don't forget the other things that you need to get done that day. So if you create this brain-friendly to-do list, a brain-friendly list is like any, and I don't know about you, but I keep like a white piece of paper next to me all the time. And as soon as something comes to mind, I add it to the list. The other thing that I try to do is to only keep today's tasks in view. Because if I have on my brain-friendly list things that I actually need to do next week, that can make it overwhelming for me. I also think when I'm creating my list or thinking about my list, I'm always thinking about like how fun it is or how satisfying it is to check things off your list. So I put a little box there, make sure that I check it off. And I try to be really, really realistic about what I can do each day to only include things that I can actually get done for the day. And finally, on my brain-friendly list, I'm also including things like, I want to get up and go to the coffee pot 3 times, or I want to make sure that I take a walk around the building, or I want to make sure that I go and talk to my coordinator at least 3 times and just chat about personal stuff. So I actually try to put in some of that mind body maintenance on my list to make sure that those things are getting done as well, because I find that if I don't actually put it on the list, then it doesn't get done. So in setting great goals, really think about how you want to operationalize that list. The second thing in setting great goals is to find your personal why. And that is really to kind of think about what matters to you most, and to be really clear about that. The other thing too is to really know that when you're when you're doing something like ARS, which is like this huge elephant of a project, to know that maybe you don't want to try to make the goal, I'm going to review all 800 applications in one day, but actually to set to break off bite-sized chunks. And so even as Becky and I are trying to approach this together to really say, okay, I'm going to review, 25 applications today, or I'm going to do a filter on my ARIS, and I'm only going to look at those who signaled me, or I'm only going to look at people from Michigan today or whatever. But I really try to create these bite-sized chunks that allow that to be on my list in a way that I can actually cross that off my list today. The next thing in setting great goals is to use when then. And so you might be thinking, what is she talking about? And so this is really, let me give you an example. So I definitely go to like my defensive brain or my angry brain when I'm at home and I'm cooking and I have a pot on the stove, and for whatever reason, my husband has to come and move the pot. This really annoys me. And I know that, it probably seems so small, but we all have like these small triggers that people in our lives do that really make us annoyed. And I know that when I like overreact and really grouch at him when he does it, I don't really want to act that way. And so I've been thinking about, like, how can I use my deliberate brain in a better way? And so I've been using this when then plan. And so that this is what I say to myself. So when my husband moves the pot next time, then I will respond with humor. So it's really kind of thinking about a dilemma that you might face and actually rehearsing in your brain, like when my son comes to me and asks for $5 again, then this is how I'm going to react. And so really thinking about these kind of hot buttons in your life and playing out in your mind in a more deliberate way, kind of what your plan is going to be the next time that it happens. So that is the when then plan. It's kind of the pre-planning for the things that you know that are your hot buttons. And then finally, to practice the mind's eye rehearsal. And we were kind of talking about that already, that when I know that I'm going to have to do something that's really challenging, to really rehearse it in my mind. And that helps me, and sometimes it's also not just rehearsing. It's like, I'm going to visualize myself. I'm going to be dressed in a certain way. I'm going to articulate myself in a certain way. And then that can help me actually to be better at accomplishing my goals when I have that positive rehearsal. Okay, so now that you've set your goals and you've taken some steps to reinforce them, now how do you best organize your time and effort to achieve your aims and ultimately your fulfillment? So let's really think about strategy number 2, which is really productivity. How do you make the hours in your day go further? How can you look back at the end of your day and say to yourself, okay, this was a day well lived, and I feel really satisfied. So let's actually start by acknowledging that you have too much to do. And interestingly, between 1970 and the year 2000, the average American added nearly 200 hours of work to his or her year. And this is equivalent to a whole month. So our to-do lists do not seem to be getting shorter. In fact, we now have to do more than we've ever had to do before. So it's true that most of us have too much to do. Our lists never seem to shorten, and that we often focus more on what is blinking more brightly, sometimes than what is more important. And that the longer our workday, the more negative impact on our productivity and cognition. So then to really understand that if we're not taking good care of our brains and our bodies, that we actually don't get more productivity out of ourselves. So the difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. So let's talk about how can we begin to build more productivity in our lives each and every day. So when you're increasing your productivity and you're thinking about how can I make the hours go further, the first task or the first tip that I'm going to talk about is called single tasking. So I want you to think about your schedule for today and really think about how you can organize your tasks to allow your brain to work at its best and to get more done. The first thing is to batch your tasks. So that is like grouping together similar tasks. It might be like, I'm going to group together email or calls or reading so that you're not constantly switching from one mental mode to another. Because actually research says that that makes you less efficient. So even though you try to do two things at once, the reality is you cannot actually do two things at once. And so batching your tasks can, okay, I'm going to set 15 minutes uninterrupted. I'm just going to dig into my email. The next thing is to zone your day. And that is to decide on the best time of day to tackle each of the things that you're trying to batch and put them into different zones. So again, using email as an example, you might say, my brain is kind of at its best first thing in the morning. I'm going to come in and from 8 to 9, I'm going to do emails. And then I'm actually going to be working on a project or some other I'm going to dig into ARIS between 9 and 11, and I'm actually not going to go back and do emails again until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So really to try to create these blocks that you put on your schedule that really allow you to dig into something, because you find that if you're trying to switch back and forth, you actually get less done of everything. The third technique is really to remove distractions, and this is to really minimize interruptions. Becky, interestingly, my coordinator, she has this little thing on her door, and she closes her door, and one of them says like, do not disturb or knock before entering, or she has like these little things that really, when she's working on something that she requires a lot of mental energy, she closes that door and says, you know, I'm in the middle of a project, don't interrupt me. And even I don't knock when that happens. So really trying to remove some of those distractions, creating rules for yourself and literally creating a parking lot to allow yourself. So even as you're removing distractions, if that pops into your mind, put it on your brain friendly list. You'll get it done. But knowing that maybe sometimes you actually do need to close your door. And thirdly, or fourth, in single tasking, this is to plan small rewards for good behavior. So how can you reward yourself for remaining focused while you complete a single task? And one thing I do actually sometimes is I'll set a timer, or you could keep a log or again a list. There's nothing I like better than like being able to cross something off or have the the timer go off. Sometimes so for my job I have to read a lot of books, but I don't really have that much time. So sometimes I'll just okay, I'm just going to read for 15 minutes. I'll set the timer on my phone, and at least I feel like I got that 15 minutes done. So these are all single tasking ways to improve your productivity. The next tip in improving your productivity is to plan deliberate downtime. So looking at your schedule today and tomorrow, think about how you could kind of incorporate some of these tips. Maybe the first thing is to take smart breaks. So how can you make sure that you take regular breaks at least every 90 minutes or between each zone of tasks that you plan for your day? Because research shows that you do get decision fatigue and that we are actually more productive if you actually take that little break than if you try to push through and exhaust yourself. The other thing is to make decisions at peaks, not troughs. So most of us, the best time of day, and I don't know if you notice this with you, but I do notice it with me, the best time of day for me to be doing really thought work is in the morning. So really thinking about what's the best time of day for you and to really plan some of those higher level activities for that time of the day that I know that I'm at my most productive. Next is to schedule breathing room. Can you schedule meetings or offer time in blocks for like 25 minutes or 45 minutes instead of 30 and 60? So try to building in. I know that that's something at Henry Ford that we've tried to do. I run a couple of different wellness task force, and we always only schedule them for 50 minutes. Really trying to build in the gift of time into those meetings that you have. The next is to really allow yourself some reflection time. And that's at the end of each task or meeting to just take 30 seconds to give a deep breath or to take a moment to close our eyes or to even just think for a moment about, something maybe that you've learned or, okay, I'm just going to take a minute and grab a cup of coffee or think about something that I'm thankful for, but to really allow these moments throughout the day. And then finally, to incorporate smart basics. And what that means is like the sleep, the exercise, and really trying to prioritize that into your life and knowing that if you don't incorporate into your life things that you need to do to keep yourself healthy, that you're not really going to be able to be as effective as you want to be. And that means exercise too. And so I know one of the things that I see my coordinator do is that she puts her tennis shoes on and like during her lunch break, she'll go for a walk. It's usually just like a 15-minute walk, but I know she comes back from that really feeling more refreshed and ready to go to the next thing. So, but even if you plan for deliberate downtime, you can still become overloaded. So the next time you're feeling overloaded, maybe trying some of these things that are on this list, mindful pause. And this is just like giving yourself a minute to count to 100 or 2 minutes to regroup. Or the next tip is about smallest first step. Thinking about the very first step you can take toward doing the most important thing. Because I think sometimes we can get overwhelmed with how large a project is. And so just thinking, okay, what's one thing I can do towards getting that done? Setting boundaries and articulating them, that's one thing I really appreciate with my coordinator because she lets me know, clearly when that door is closed or in other ways. Or even one of the things that she and I really tried to do is I really tried to encourage her to not respond to me after hours. I said, I can't help myself. I still have to get it out of my brain, but I'm okay with you not checking stuff after hours. So having those clear boundaries and having an understanding between you and the people that you work with, I think can be really, really important to your own, to your own brain health and not becoming overloaded. Automating small decisions also can be really, really important to you or to each of us. So, if there's certain things like if you like bagels and you want to eat bagels every day and eating bagels every day helps you to not have to think about what you're going to eat, then eat bagels every day. Or if you like wearing black, then just buy black clothes and wear black every day. I mean, I think just really thinking about are there some things in my life that I don't want to actually expend mental energy on doing that I could just make automatic that would make it so much easier for me. And then also finally creating a good thinking environment. And that's about uncluttering both your life and your workspace at home and here to surround yourself. Like I have this little thing, here it says think big. And if that doesn't work, think bigger. Or, things that maybe patients have given me that are in my affirming space here that that really helps me to be more positive, to surround myself with positive things, can be really, really helpful. I also think in terms of creating a good work environment, during the pandemic, many of us were working at home. And whenever I had to give a presentation, I would always dress like I was about ready to give a presentation. And that included wearing high heels. And my husband would laugh and he'd be like, oh, you haven't even left the house and you're wearing high heels. And I'm like, honey, these are my power heels and I'm not leaving them in the closet. I got to wear my power heels when so it's also kind of thinking about how can you create that good environment in the surrounding, but also just how you present yourself. So if you need to wear those power heels, make sure that you have them and that you're ready to go. So how can we overcome procrastination? Because I feel like this is something we all have, that we all are guilty of doing. emails that we didn't write, projects that we didn't start, putting off like the bigger projects. We are human after all, and even though I do feel like coordinators are extraordinary people and they can do so much more than others, I think that having some tricks in our toolbox that can help us when we're feeling like putting something off can be really helpful. So one of those tips is to picture the benefits. And so thinking about what will be better as a result of getting this done for you and for others can sometimes be motivating. Plan maybe a short-term reward. Like how can you plan to reward yourself for working toward a goal that you really, it's a project that you really don't want to work on. So for me, it might be rewarding myself with a cup of tea or a walk outside. And so really kind of thinking about, okay, if I do this for the next hour, like what treat am I going to give myself at the end of it? Committing to it out loud. I know this really helps me. When I say to someone else, even to my husband, it makes it more real. Or to have testimony to I love my coordinator, and I would actually consider her my best friend at work, and to commit to something out loud to her, whether or not it's something like I'm maybe working on my diet, or the next week we are going to eat healthy all week, or we're going to go together on a walk, or whatever it is. But committing out loud really, for me, I don't know, now I have an accountability partner. To amplify the downside of inaction can be motivating for some people and not for others, but kind of thinking about what will happen if I don't get it done, but also what will happen if I do get it done. And finally, asking myself the 5 whys if you're still finding yourself kind of reluctant to make progress. So you could ask yourself, why am I stalling on completing this project? Why do I say that? Why is this a problem for me? And keep asking yourself why until the real reason for the procrastination surfaces, and then think about how you can handle that issue. So the key really here is to pause and be asking yourself. Sometimes you kind of get to it. It's kind of like, well, I'm pausing on integrating thalamus into how we're going to approach recruitment this year because I feel overwhelmed by the technology. And I just really need to sit down and give myself time to actually get it done. And so I think oftentimes we are shy to, or we avoid the things that we feel like not confident in doing. So these are just some tips to beat procrastination. So thank you so much for those of you who are putting stuff into the chat box. We talked about some things that you can do, like how can you set your priorities in a more intentional way? How can you think about your assumptions and your attention? Where can you put it? How can you improve your productivity? I'm just wondering again, if you feel like you want to, could you commit out loud in front of all your people who are in your space? Is there anything that you heard or that you've been thinking about that you'd like to commit to doing in front of your colleagues? It's maybe a tip that you learned from me so far, or something that you feel like you've been meaning to do and you really need to do. So if you feel comfortable, put that in the chat box. Come on, there's no commitments from any of you? One new message. Let's see, what is my new message here? To step away and go for a walk. Thanks, Tina. I love how engaged you are. Not working through my lunch break. Hallelujah, Nicole. I do that all the time, and I feel like that's a great commitment. And for sure, at least giving yourself 15 minutes of uninterrupted time to just like be. I love that. Taking breaks to stretch, not checking emails over the weekend. Oh, I love you, Dana. Committing to taking that first step when overloaded, no matter how small that is. I think it can really help to get you moving. It's really interesting because I feel like the more you do, the more you can do. And certainly action promotes action. Like you probably all already notice that when you actually take that first step, it makes it easier to take the next one. But sometimes like the first step is the hardest step. Okay, so moving on. So the third strategy is around resilience. How can we set get through some of these setbacks and annoyances. We all have them. Of course, life is full of uncertainties, and I feel like even more, finally, I feel like I know I'm feeling more and more like myself after the pandemic, but, what can we do when things happen and things become derailed? And of course, we're trying to be these superhuman people at work, and we have life at home too. And, obviously life isn't always easy and doesn't always bring good. Um, there's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So I like that. It kind of just makes me think about when I'm thinking too much about the bad, it makes it more of a reality in my life. So in building resilience, how can I keep a cool head? You can't know for sure what the next curveball is going to be. And so how can you stay cool? And the first thing is to step back and label it. Like I was saying that earlier this week, I was kind of having a rough week, and I just realized that I was kind of doing that to myself. I had gotten into my head, and I was feeling a lot of stress. And you know what? I just had to stop and say, okay, there you go. You're beating yourself up. And so I had to kind of label that. Getting some distance. You can all do this by talking to yourself in the third person, instead of I'm really worried about this, and I did this to myself this week. Okay, Lisa, um, relax. So I'll talk to myself and then think about, how I want to approach something. And sometimes I'll give myself advice. Like, come on, Lisa, you give advice every day. Practice your own advice. So that gives me a little bit of distance and allows me to kind of look at it from the outside. Another way is to ask yourself kind of a rewarding question. You could ask yourself, okay, what am I going to learn from this? Or we got some feedback from our chair that he didn't like the way we did grand rounds this week. And I had to talk with Becky about it. And I knew she was kind of upset and she was kind of taking it personal. And I had to kind of say to her, we probably could tweak it. Maybe we should think about doing it a little bit different. It doesn't mean that the way we're doing it is completely broken, but maybe there is a better way. And so maybe instead of kind of taking that in and beating ourselves up, maybe we could actually take something from this that would be good. And then finally, to do some deep breathing, and that is to really take a deep breath into our lungs completely and to hold it and then to let it out. And I find that when I'm really, really feeling stressed, that really helps keep a cool head. That really gets that tension out. And sometimes I have to do it 2 or 3 times before I'm finally feeling like I'm releasing some of that stress. So when we are our most resilient, we are able to convey confidence. And so this is just kind of some ways to think about how can I convey confidence in a more effective way. So one of the things is to reframe your nerves as excitement. So it's like telling yourself a different message. Instead of telling yourself, oh my God, I'm so nervous about giving this presentation, to say, I'm excited. That sensation that I'm feeling is because I could not wait to get in this room today and meet you all and talk to you. And what I'm feeling is not stress, but it's excitement. And that helps calm my body a little bit. The next is to connect to my values, to think about what really matters, what's the bigger purpose of what it is that I'm trying to do, and to really focus on and connect to that message can help me be more confident. And then finally, to take your space. And you might be like, what is that? Take your space. And this is actually to give yourself time before something that you're facing to stand straight, to throw maybe your arms wide, to square your shoulder, to take up all the space that your body, to hold your head up instead of being hunched and, and putting yourself into a smaller space. So you find that, like when you stretch that body, you hold that head up and you put those shoulders back and you take up that space, that is a way that your body is showing that it is more confident, and you actually fool your brain into thinking that you are. Next is, whenever you're facing a lot of ups and downs, to work that mind body loop, to say to yourself, okay, I'm not, self-care does not happen without intention. This means like you have to recognize that you have to put your mask on, before you can take care of those residents and your family, you got to take care of you. That means feeding yourself healthy fuel, it means having movement, it means prioritizing your sleep, taking breaks, being mindful, having those pauses, but really knowing none of this stuff is going to happen by accident. It really takes planning. It really takes planning. And when you can do it with intention, that helps you to stay strong. So whenever though you are facing a lot of struggle, it's also to watch out for that fatigue. When you notice that you're feeling, it should be feeling, not feeling, but you're feeling impatient or irritable, you're finding it hard to think straight, or you're making small, clumsy mistakes, to really say, okay, there you go, Lisa, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. Let me just take a break right now. I need to take a break. I'm going to go grab a cup of tea. I'm going to shift my focus. Maybe I'm going to take a break from this mentally, like I need to take a break from ARS. It's just like hurting my brain. And I'm going to actually, take care of something else right now that I need to get done. That's a little bit less mentally taxing. And then two, I think just focusing on what's going well and to visualize your success. Fourth strategy I've told you that we were going to talk about is, how to boost your enthusiasm and energy. And so at this point, you've started this toolkit of things that you're putting into your toolbox to find commitment. Again, you've learned about focusing on the right things, the importance of organizing yourself and owning your own attitude and making your hours go further, and really working through that procrastination and setting aside some of those annoying things and being more confident. So hopefully you've learned some things that are going to help you to have more mojo every day and to handle some difficult situations. And so how can we build more energy in our life and more enjoyment and enthusiasm? Energy enables a man to force his way through irksome drudgery and dry details and carries him onward and upward to every station in life. So we need that energy, I think, to really to show up in the way that we want to show up. So how can we top up our tank? So how can you actually boost that energy? And so these are probably things that you've heard before, but I feel like these are things that actually do bring more joy to my life. So actually, number one is the three good things. And this is really about, shifting a perspective towards one of gratefulness. And it might be, again, as you're thinking about creating that environment of success around you, keeping a notebook there that when something happens really good, kind of writing that down, or thinking about something you feel grateful for. One of the things that I did with my college age kids is that I oftentimes will email them things I'm grateful for, and then I poke at them and try to get back a response from them. And that's been really a great way to kind of hear what's going on in their lives and what they're celebrating and the things that are happening with them. So that's a really great way to, I think, top off your tank and build a general sense of positivity in our life. The next thing is random acts of kindness. And this is really about doing something nice for someone else. It might be, giving them a compliment, or earlier you talked about appreciation, or just being helpful to someone. Or when you go to grab a cup of tea, grab 2 cups of tea and run one over, to someone that you work with, someone in your space, and say, hey, I was just thinking about you, thought I'd bring you a hot cup of tea. Can be really a nice way of building more positivity in your workspace, or even, like if you're stop at the gas station on your way home and you go in, you see your like husband's favorite candy, you're like, I'm gonna buy him one of these and bring it home. The next strategy is to make time for your people. And these are really your human connections. But also I think I probably shouldn't, it should have been make time for your human and animal connections. So I think even our pets can be something that can really be very important in our lives. I think uh, it was maybe Kylene who said she has 11 dogs. So she definitely needs to make time for her connections and to spend time with the things and the people in our lives that give us good vibes and to make us feel good and to fill us up, and to make sure that we always do that on a daily basis. And then finally, we talked about earlier that even if you fake that smile, it can change your brain chemistry. So don't forget to smile. Better yet, find time to laugh every day. And one of the things that I regularly do that I really think enhances the joy and boosts my energy is dancing in the kitchen. I highly recommend it. Is something that will actually top your tank off. So one final exercise, and I did make a commitment to you that in the spirit of wellness, I did want this to not necessarily last all the way up to the top of the hour. And so I'm hoping our final exercise is there anything you learned today that you're going to think about enhancing or doing in your life to find increased fulfillment? If you're willing to share it with the group, we would love to hear from you. Write it in the chat box, and then we'll open it up and see if anyone has any questions. So Missy said something about her ever growing to-do list, which I agree. That's maybe why maybe don't put everything on your list. Save some things for tomorrow so that you can actually complete a to-do list for today. Calendar, oh, the when then responses. Oh my goodness, I have to use that. Like when my son does this again, next time I'm going to respond in this way. That does help me prepare to actually do it. The fact that you're sharing in the beginning, residents will always complain. Don't I love that? I thank you. I feel like that is the biggest lesson that I learned. I used to I would lose sleep over their unhappiness. And now I just say, oh no, this is what we do. This is why they pay us the bucks. This is part of our job. And that really, really, really helps me to kind of set the perspective and right expectations. Getting up to take a walk and a break. Tina, I don't know where you're at, Tina, but I wish I was there to do that with you. And here in Michigan, it is such a great day. So I guess I'm going to stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. One thing I did take from this is that being positive in your life is really helpful, because when things are negative and it just seems to snowball from there, just things keep going down. So if you're positive in any area, work, home, whatever, it just really makes for a better day.
Well, so let me respond to that with actually some education, because this is actually totally my sweet spot. So actually, the happiness or the positivity that we have in our lives, about 50% of our degree of happiness is actually genetic. So some of us bring with us some genes that can sometimes unfortunately contribute to our unhappiness. About 10% of the happiness that we have in our life is actually our circumstances. And 40% of the amount of happiness that we have in our life is really our own attitudes, our behaviors, and how we think. So we actually have quite a bit of control over how much positivity we have in our lives or not. So I love what you said. I do think, though, that our brains are wired to go to the negative. I mean, I'm sure all of us know, like when we go to the checkout line at the grocery store, our eyes always go to that negative headline before the positive one. That's the way our brains work. And to recognize that it actually takes 3 positives to overcome 1 negative. So if you are someone who you like this restaurant, you've gone there a million times before, and you go and you have a negative experience, as you're walking out of the restaurant, you're saying to yourself, I'm not coming back here. I'm sure many of us can identify or have had that experience. And then now it's going to take 3 good times of going there to supersede that negative. So the tipping point is at 3 positives to override 1 negative. So we give lots of the negative things that happen in our lives a lot of power over our lives. Unfortunately, most of us, as we're driving home at the end of the day, we're not thinking about all the residents we helped and all the things we got done. We're thinking about that one thing that went wrong today, that one negative interaction, or that one thing that your boss said to you that really made you feel like you wish that you could just punch him in the guts, right? So that's unfortunately, our minds naturally do that.
So Erin has a question. How do you incorporate the fires into your day?
Yeah, the unexpected things that happen each and every day. I think maybe one of the ways that I try to do that, and sometimes I do it better than others, we are all human. So one of the things I try to tell me is that the fires are part of the job, right? I mean, every year as coordinators, I'm sure you're faced with something you've never seen before. You're like, oh my God, like I thought I saw it all, especially for some of you who've been doing this for a really long time. So some of it's attitudinal. Sometimes too, it's taking a deep breath. I oftentimes when I don't do it alone, like I might reach out to a colleague, a program director, like in another specialty for you guys. It's reaching out to one of your colleagues, maybe through this organization or a coordinator at your home site in another specialty to run it by them to see what they think. To not try to immediately react without kind of stepping back away from it a little bit, and to know like this is just part of the job, right? So if you come to work every day and think there's never going to be a fire, like that is just not realistic. And the sooner I kind of embraced that, I don't know, like I deal with psychiatric patients every day. I can't expect everyone to come in and not be depressed, right? It's like what I do. And so there's going to be fires that I have to deal with. Sometimes there's going to be things that irk my day and that I need to deal with. So I just embrace that. It makes it a whole lot easier.
So thank you. And then Tina asked if we could get the slides. I believe this is being recorded, and I'm not sure when it'll be available, but we could probably get it through our management company.
Thanks all for just your enthusiasm and your engagement. I actually live a lot of these things, and I do find that they help build that positivity and more fulfillment and help me keep organized on top of things. That's one thing. As coordinators, you are the top dog when it comes to organization. Like there isn't, you are, I mean, in terms of you are the organizers of the program. We can't do it without you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And a lot of people are just responding, thank you. So
Yeah.
I think
Thank
it's
you
been
so much,
helpful.
Dr. McLean.
Good luck with Eris, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.